He walked into the room, and every wolf in it went silent. Not the polite silence of people acknowledging power. The specific, animal silence of creatures who understand, at the level below thought, that the thing that has just entered the space is something they cannot afford to misread. I heard it. I always heard things that other people saw. I heard the silence arrive. I heard the quality of the air change. That particular shift that happens when a dominant wolf enters a room and the room reorganizes itself around him without anyone deciding to do it. I heard the footsteps, measured, unhurried, the steps of someone who had never once in his life needed to hurry, cross from the door to the center of the space. And I heard the moment he stopped. And I heard, in the silence that followed, the exact second he became aware of me. Not because he made a sound, because the footsteps stopped and the air changed again, differently this time. And I felt the weight of attention the way you feel heat from a fire when you're standing 3 feet from it. I could not see him. I have not been able to see anything since I was 7 years old. But I had learned, in 19 years of navigating a world built for people who could see it, to register things that sighted people moved too fast to notice. And what I registered in that moment, what landed in my chest like a hand pressed flat against a door, was recognition. Not mine. His. He recognized me. This man, this brutal, feared, legendary Alpha King who had walked into the Thornfeld Pack's formal assembly with the weight of a continental sovereign and the reputation of someone who had ended 3 wars and dismantled 2 packs, and who, according to everyone who had ever encountered him, had never once shown a moment of anything resembling softness, was standing 6 feet away from me, and something in him had recognized me, and I had absolutely no idea why. What I did not know, what I would not know for another 3 months, through some of the most confusing and significant and terrifying weeks of my life, was that we had met before, a long time ago, when I was 7 years old and everything went dark, and he was the reason I had survived it. Like the video. Hit that subscribe button right now and drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because people from every country on this earth have found this channel, and this story, this one right here, is going to stay with you long after it ends. Now come with me. To the beginning. Not the assembly. Not the Alpha King. To a 7-year-old girl in a burning house, and the boy who carried her out. Her name was Lireth Vane, and the first thing you needed to know about Lireth was that she did not experience the world as a place of limitation. This was not performance. It was not the forced optimism of someone managing a difficult circumstance by pretending it was something else. It was simply accurate. The world, to Lireth, was sound and texture and temperature, and the specific information of air moving differently in different spaces. It was the weight of footsteps on different surfaces and the way voices changed when they were performing versus when they were being honest. It was the smell of weather before it arrived and the particular quality of silence that preceded significant things. She had not always been blind. She remembered light. Not clearly. She had been 7, and the memories were old. And the fire had happened so fast that what remained was more impression than image. She remembered the color orange in a way that was somehow also a sound, because the fire had been loud. She remembered something hot, and something falling, and something that was very dark and very fast, and a voice. A boy's voice. Not a child's voice, exactly. Older than that. 14, maybe 15. The specific register of someone in the in-between. She remembered the voice saying, "Hold on. I have you. Don't let go." She remembered the cold air on her face after the heat, which meant outside, which meant she had gotten out. She had been in the hospital for 3 weeks. When she left, she had no sight. The smoke and the heat and whatever had happened to her eyes in those specific minutes had done something permanent, and the healers, both human and wolf, had been honest about the permanence in the careful way that honest people delivered permanent things. She had adapted. Children adapted in ways that adults found impossible to fully understand. The world reshaped itself around what she had instead of what she no longer had. And she had been 7, which was young enough that the reshaping happened before she had fully understood what she was reshaping from. By the time she was 10, she was navigating the Thornfeld Pack compound with a fluency that impressed people who had been doing it sighted for decades. By 12, she had developed the specific gift that emerged from years of heightened non-visual attention, the ability to read a room with her ears and her skin and her nose in ways that were, in their own specific category, more accurate than sight. She could tell you who in a room was lying. She could tell you who was afraid. She could tell you, before the words had been said, what kind of conversation was about to happen, its emotional weather, its underlying agenda, its surface presentation versus its actual intention. This was extremely useful. It was also, in a pack culture that did not have a robust framework for wolves with her kind of disability, frequently overlooked. Omega was her rank designation, not assigned cruelly. She had tested, as all pack members tested, and Omega was the honest result of where her biology sat in the hierarchy. She was not a ranked wolf in the traditional sense. She was not a fighter, not a dominant, not someone whose physical presence commanded the instinctive response that ranked wolves generated. What she was something the Thornfeld Pack had not quite developed the vocabulary for. She worked in the pack's records and communications office, an excellent placement, actually, given her particular gifts, because she was the fastest and most accurate transcriptionist the pack had ever employed, could identify inconsistencies in correspondence that escaped everyone else, and had, over 6 years, developed a filing system for the archive that was both comprehensive and elegantly logical. She was valued. She was not overlooked in the crude sense. But she was, in the specific way that pack culture overlooked the things it hadn't built frameworks for, not entirely seen. She was 26 years old. She had built a life that was real and functional and genuinely hers. She had not thought about the boy's voice for a very long time. She had not needed to. The voice was old, and the fire was a long time ago, and she had been 7, and she was 26, and lives moved forward even when they started in burning houses. And then the Alpha King of the Velther Reach walked into the Thornfeld Pack's assembly room. And something she had buried so deep and so long ago that she had forgotten it existed came back to her surface all at once. Not a memory. Not the voice exactly. A feeling. The feeling of hold on. I have you. Don't let go. The Velther Alpha King's name was Dauren Veth. And the thing that everyone in the northern and southern packs knew about Dauren Veth was this. He was not a man you approached casually. He was not a man who inspired warmth or ease or the comfortable feeling of being in the presence of someone who had made peace with the world around them. He inspired something else. The precise quality of it depended on who was feeling it. For his allies. And he had allies, because he was effective and his word was absolute. And in a world where pack sovereignty required trust, his track record was flawless. What they felt was something close to deep, complicated relief. The relief of knowing that this man was oriented in your direction. For his enemies, of which there were fewer than there once had been, because enemies of Dauren Veth tended to eventually become former enemies in one way or another. What they felt was the unambiguous awareness that they were in the field of attention of something that would not be managed. He was 33 years old. He had taken the Velther mantle at 23, after a succession crisis that had lasted 2 years, and that he had resolved by being the most capable and the most honest, and, when honesty was insufficient, the most formidable person in the room until the room agreed. He was 6'3" and built with the economy of someone who had maintained physical capability not for aesthetics, but for function. His face was not beautiful. That was not the right word. It was the kind of face that made you understand something about the 23 years of experience on it. The kind that asked to be read rather than admired. He had, in his 10 years as Alpha King of the Velther Reach, crossed into the Thornfeld Pack's territory for formal visits twice. This was the third. The third visit had been requested by Thornfeld's Alpha printer for the purpose of discussing a trade alliance that both packs had been negotiating for a year. standard diplomatic territory. Dauren attended these things because they required attending and because he was, despite his reputation, genuinely interested in the outcome of things he committed to. He walked into the assembly room for the pre-meeting reception, the social hour before the formal sitting, the kind of event that existed to let people take each other's measure in a less formal context. And the room did what rooms did when he entered. He had learned to not hear the silence anymore. It had become atmospheric rather than specific, just the quality of rooms when he was in them. He took a cup of something from the nearest table and turned to survey the room. And he saw Lireth Vane. Not doing anything remarkable. She was standing slightly to the side of the main gathering, near the window, with her hands loosely clasped and her face turned at a slight angle that was, he understood immediately, a position for listening rather than seeing. A white cane was held lightly in her right hand, not being used in this static moment, just present. She was not looking at him. She could not look at him. But her face was turned fractionally in his direction with the quality of someone who was aware of him through some mechanism that was not vision. He looked at her face. And something happened. He did not stop walking in time. He had momentum from crossing the room, and it carried him 3 more steps before his body registered what his mind had already understood and stopped him. He stood. He looked. He had not thought about that night in 19 years. He had been 14 years old. He had been in the Vane border territory for reasons that were complicated and which had nothing to do with the Vane Pact specifically. The fire had been visible from half a mile. Not a large fire yet when he first saw it, but growing fast. He had gone toward it because he was 14 and his wolf was strong, and going toward dangerous things was apparently something he had been doing since before he had the language to question it. The house had been burning from the inside out. He had gone in. It was not, looking back, the most rational decision of his life. But he had been 14, and the fire had been visible, and inside the fire was a child. He had gotten her out. He had carried her to the road and left her where someone would find her quickly, because he had not been supposed to be in the Vane border territory, and the reasons for his presence were complicated, and explaining them would have created a situation that he had not been equipped to manage at 14. He had stayed until he saw the light of approaching wolves from the pack settlement, until he was certain she would be found. And then he had gone. He had not known if she survived. He had not known what had happened to her afterward. He had told himself, over the years, that she had been found, that someone had helped her, that she had been all right. He had told himself. He had not known. He was looking at her now, at a woman who was 26 and who had a white cane and who was standing near a window in the Thornfeld assembly room. And he was doing the arithmetic. 7 years old when the fire happened. 7 plus 19. 26. Her name, according to the guest roster he had reviewed before the meeting, because he reviewed guest rosters, because he was thorough, was Lireth Vane. Vane. Vane border territory, 19 years ago. He stood very still. And she turned her face slightly further in his direction, with the quality of someone reading the air, and something moved through her expression that he couldn't interpret because he was not, as she was, in the habit of reading faces without visual information. He did not approach her at the reception, not because he was uncertain, not because the recognition had shaken him in a way he needed to manage, but because he was a man who did not act on impulse, and what had just happened qualified as the kind of thing that required, not delay, exactly, but precision. He needed to be certain. He was nearly certain. But nearly was not the same as certain, and if he was wrong, the consequences of being wrong in this specific direction were not something he could undo by clarifying later. He watched her through the reception. Not constantly. He was a functional social actor even in his legendary formidability, and the Thornfeld Alpha required his genuine attention for the portions of the evening that warranted it. But in the margins, he watched how she moved. The specific efficiency of it, the way she navigated the space with a combination of memory and real-time sound reading that was so practiced, it was invisible. The way she tilted her head slightly, when someone spoke to her from across the room, not in the direction of the voice, but at a slight angle to it, which he understood, with the wolf's enhanced sound perception, was the optimal angle for a specific kind of listening. He watched people talk to her. Some of them did the thing that people did with someone they were uncertain how to interact with: a mild overcorrection, a compensatory brightness, the specific quality of attention that was performing attention rather than actually giving it. Some of them simply talked to her. These were, he noted, the more interesting people in the room. She had, he observed, a quality in her face when she was listening that most people never develop because they were also simultaneously processing visual input. Her attention was complete. Whatever she was receiving from the world, she was giving her entire available capacity to, which meant that the people who talked to her received something most people rarely experienced. He wanted to talk to her. He was surprised by the wanting. Not alarmed. Surprised. He waited until the reception was concluding, the transition point where people began moving toward the dining arrangements and the room's configuration changed, and he crossed to where she was standing. "Lireth Vane," he said. She turned. Her face was toward him now, which required its own adjustment. The experience of being fully attended to without being seen was, he found, more disorienting than he had expected. Not unpleasantly, just different. Like a familiar mechanism operating in a novel way. "Alpha King Veth," she said. Her voice was even and measured and completely unsurprised. "You knew I was coming toward you," he said. "I knew someone was coming toward me with specific intent about 4 steps ago," she said. "I identified you from the air shift when you entered the room." A pause. "You displace a different quality of space than most wolves." "Do I?" he said. "It's not a critique," she said. "It's observation." He looked at her face. "I'd like to speak with you privately," he said. "Not tonight. I have the formal dinner and the treaty discussions. But during the visit, if you're willing." A pause. Not a hesitation pause. A listening pause. The specific beat she took when she was reading something that needed reading. "May I ask why?" she said. "I believe we've met before," he said. The quality of the air between them changed. He felt her register it, watched her face do something small and fast, and then very controlled. "A long time ago," he said. "I'm not certain, but I'd like to be." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing." He nodded, a reflex he immediately identified as unnecessary, since she couldn't see it. "Tomorrow," he said, "after the morning session, I'll send someone to find you. I'll be in the records office," she said. "3rd floor, East Corridor. You don't need to send someone. I'll be there." He looked at her for one more moment. "Good," he said. He walked toward the dining arrangements. And behind him, he heard a sound he had not expected. A single, almost inaudible breath, taken with the quality of someone steadying themselves. She felt it too. Whatever it was. She felt it too. The records office was, as she had said, on the 3rd floor of the East Corridor. He arrived after the morning session, which had gone well. The trade alliance had a cleaner resolution in sight than either pack had expected at the outset, which was the result of both parties having reviewed the material carefully and arrived with genuine rather than performative interest in agreement. He knocked on the open door. "Come in," she said, without looking up from the desk. He understood she was using the term loosely. He came in. She was at a desk with documents arranged in a pattern that made sense to him on closer inspection, not random, but organized by a tactile system, with small markers at the corners of different stacks. She had a recording device running, which she clicked off when he entered. She turned in her chair to face his direction. "Close the door," she said. "Not because I need privacy from the hall, but because the air current from the corridor makes it harder to read the room." He closed the door. He sat in the chair across from her desk, which was positioned at an angle that he suspected was deliberate, not directly across from the door, but slightly to the side, so that anyone entering was to her left rather than directly in front, which meant she heard them arrive rather than registering them in her blind spot center. She had been arranging this room for optimal information gathering for years. He found himself quietly impressed. "You said we met before," she said. Directly. He was beginning to understand, not someone who circled. "Yes." "How long ago?" 19 years. She was still. "I would have been 7, she said. "Yes." A pause. "Where?" she asked. "The Vane border territory," he said. "The eastern edge." There was a house fire. The pause that followed was longer. He watched her face. Watching her face was becoming something he did very attentively, because her face was where the information was, not the performed information, the real kind. And her face right now was doing something that was the equivalent, in sighted communication, of someone putting down everything they were holding. "There was a child in the house," he said. "I went in and carried her out. I left her on the road when I saw pack wolves coming from the settlement. I didn't know," he paused. "I didn't know what happened to her afterward." She breathed. "A voice," she said. And her own voice had changed. Lost the professional register. Become something more elemental. "I remember a voice. A boy's voice. Older than mine. I was 14, he said." She pressed her fingers flat on the desk. "Hold on," she said slowly. "I have you. Don't let go." The words came out of her like something she had not known she had. Not with feeling, with the quality of something retrieved from a very deep place. Like reading words in a language you thought you'd forgotten. He was very still. "You remember that," he said. "I didn't know I remembered it," she said. "I thought I remembered the voice. The feeling of being carried. The cold air." She stopped. "I didn't know I remembered the words." The records office was very quiet. "You were all right," he said. "You're all right." A strange thing to say to someone who had been all right for 19 years. But he had been 14 when the question was open, and the 14-year-old in him, apparently, had things to say. She looked at him, in the direction of him, with an expression he couldn't fully name. Not quite the word recognition, not quite the word grief, not quite the word relief, but somewhere in the center of all three. "I lost my sight," she said. "From the fire. From whatever happened in there." He closed his eyes briefly. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't," she said. "You weren't supposed to stay." She paused. "I always understood that. Someone came, and they got me out, and they couldn't stay. I was always grateful for the getting out." She paused again. "I just never knew who." The room held the weight of 19 years of not knowing. "I'm sorry," he said. "About your sight. And that I didn't. That I couldn't." "You were 14, she said. "You went into a burning house at 14 because there was a child inside. That's not something you apologize for. I could have checked. You made sure I was found," she said. "I was found. I was cared for. I've had a life." She said it without wistfulness. Simply, the way she said everything. He looked at her. "I should have known," he said. "I should have." Dauren. His name. She had used his name. Not his title. His name. And something in his chest responded to it with a specificity that surprised him. "You did what you could," she said. "At 14. With what you had. In the conditions you had it." She paused. "That's all anyone can do." He sat with this. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "When I walked into the assembly room last night," he said, "you felt something. I watched your face." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "What did you feel?" Another pause. "Something that I had no context for," she said carefully. "Something that was old and specific, like a sound I'd heard a long time ago and thought I'd forgotten." She breathed. "I felt recognized. Before I knew by whom. Just recognized." He looked at her. The bond was not something he had been expecting. He would be honest about that with himself. Now that he was sitting in a records office on a 3rd floor and realizing that 19 years of a question he hadn't let himself fully ask had just answered itself in the form of a woman with a white cane and the most attentive face he had ever been the subject of. The bond was there. It had probably been there since the assembly room. It may have been there since a burning house on the Vane border territory, waiting for the two people inside the story to be old enough to understand what they were feeling. He was not going to say any of this in the records office on the 2nd day of a trade alliance visit. But he felt it. And he thought, watching her face in the specific way he had been watching it since last night, that she felt it too. The visit lasted 5 days. He extended it. Not by much. 2 days beyond the formal diplomatic schedule, justified on the grounds of finalizing alliance documentation, which was true and also not entirely the reason. He came to the records office every morning after the formal sessions. Not because he had asked her permission. Because on the second morning after their first conversation, she was there when he arrived, at exactly the time he had come the previous day, with 2 cups of tea on the desk and the recording device already off. She had known he was coming back. She knew things. He was beginning to understand the specific texture of the way she knew things, not through the obvious channels, but through the accumulated data of a world she had been reading differently from other people for 19 years. The weight of footsteps, the quality of silences, the emotional weather of voices, the particular air shift of specific presences. She had built a map of the world from everything except sight, and the map was extraordinarily accurate. He told her things he had not said to many people. About the 14-year-old who had been in the Vane border territory that night. What he had been doing there, which was the complicated part. He had been running, in the way that young wolves sometimes ran when the pack structure was the pressure rather than the support. His father had been a difficult man in specific ways that he had spent years developing language for. The border territory had been far enough from the main compound that he had felt, briefly, like someone who did not have to be the alpha's heir. And then there had been a fire. She listened. She did not offer the reassurances that people offered when they did not know what else to do. She listened with the quality of attention that was complete, and then she asked questions that were specific and precise, and that landed in the exact place the telling needed. She told him things about the Thornfeld pack and the records office and the filing system she had built over 6 years. About the particular satisfaction of work that was genuinely hers, that required her specific gifts rather than working around their absence. About the 7-year-old who had adapted to darkness with the practical resourcefulness of a child who had not yet learned that adaptation was supposed to be difficult. About the voice she had remembered but not been able to place. I used to think about it sometimes, she said, on the 4th morning. When I was young. Who it had been. Whether they knew what happened afterward. I thought about it, he said. Less than I should have, probably. You had a pack to run, she said. That's an excuse, he said. Yes, she agreed. But it's also true. Both things can be real. He looked at her. She was at her desk with her tea, turned in his direction, with that expression of complete attention that he had begun to look forward to in a way he was not going to pretend was purely professional. The bond, he said. She went still. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to do anything about it, he said. I'm just not managing it, she said. Yes. Good, she said. I would notice if you were managing it. I know, he said. That's why I'm not. A pause. It was there in the assembly room, she said. I didn't know what it was at first. I thought it was the recognition. The old memory being triggered. She breathed. But it was still there after the memory arrived. Still there this morning. She set her teacup down. I've never felt a mate bond before. I wasn't sure I would recognize it. Have you now? Yes, she said simply. I believe so. He was quiet for a moment. Lireth. She looked at him. In the way that was entirely her own. I have 5 days left in this territory, he said. 5 days is not enough time to. I know, she said. I'm not in a position to ask you to change your life based on 5 days and a bond and a burning house 19 years ago. No, she agreed. But I want to be honest, he said. Which is that I am going to come back. If you're willing to receive me. She was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? She said. Yes. The way people treat me here, in the Thornfeld pack, is not cruel, she said carefully. I want to be fair about that. They've given me work and shelter and a functional position. They've accepted my disability as a fact of my life without making it the entirety of my identity, mostly. She paused. But there is a specific way of being valued that is still a form of being managed. A way of being respected that contains, underneath it, a ceiling. A place you're allowed to occupy and beyond which your existence makes people uncertain. He listened. You talk to me like I'm a person, she said. Not like I'm a situation they're managing generously. A pause. I don't have a great deal of context for what that feels like. I've had it before, with certain people. Not with this quality. Not with, she stopped. Not consistently, he said quietly. Not consistently, she confirmed. He looked at her face. The bond was there. He felt it with the same specific, unambiguous quality that he felt everything, directly, without the performance of managing the feeling into a more convenient shape. I'll come back, he said, in 3 weeks. Not on pack business, or not only on pack business. On my own time. If you're willing. She turned her face slightly, not away from him, but at that listening angle. Yes, she said. I'm willing. He came back. 3 weeks later, as he had said, because Dauren said what he meant and meant what he said, which was a quality he had developed over 20 years of understanding that the alternative was a specific kind of corrosion. He came without entourage, with 2 members of his personal security who remained at the compound perimeter, at his specific instruction, and did not accompany him to the records office or anywhere else he went during the 2-day visit. He arrived in the morning. She was there. They had been exchanging correspondence in the intervening 3 weeks. Not romantic correspondence, exactly, though not purely professional either. She wrote the way she spoke, precise, specific, occasionally dry in a way that landed perfectly. He had read her letters more than once, which was not a habit he had applied to correspondence since he was considerably younger. He sat in the chair. She had tea. They talked. He came back again 3 weeks after that. And again, on the 4th visit, the Thornfeld Alpha, a careful man named Printer who was politically astute and had clearly been tracking this development with the attention it warranted, asked for a private meeting. He went. Printer was not antagonistic. He was careful, which was different. I want to understand your intentions, Printer said, with the directness of someone who had decided that dancing around the subject was less efficient than naming it. Regarding Lireth Vane, I intend to court her, he said, honestly, and with her full informed consent. And then, if she's willing, to formalize a mate bond. He looked at Printer steadily. I am telling you this directly because I believe you're owed direct information about a member of your pack. I am not asking for permission. Printer absorbed this. She's an Omega, he said. Carefully. I know her rank designation, he said. The bond is real, he said. I'm not managing it with political language. A pause. She will need to be released from pack membership if she chooses to join the Velther Reach, Printer said. I know the process, he said. I will observe it fully. She will have complete agency in the decision. She will not be asked to choose on a timeline that doesn't serve her. Printer looked at him for a long moment. She is valued here, he said. And in his voice was something that was more personal than administrative. I know, he said. I have seen how she works and what she has built. I am not here to remove something from this pack. I am here to offer something to her, if she wants it. Printer nodded slowly. Then speak to her, he said, and I will support whatever she decides. He left the meeting and went to the records office. She was there. Printer had concerns, she said, when he sat down. He expressed them directly, and I answered them directly, he said. Do you have concerns? She turned her face in his direction. I have questions, she said. Several. Ask them. She did. They were specific and real, and some of them were difficult. She asked about the Velther Reach's structural accommodation for a mate who had her disability, not in the sense of whether they would make exceptions, but in the sense of whether the physical environment and cultural framework would support her functioning independently. She asked about the political implications of an Alpha King mating with an Omega from a secondary pack. She asked what he understood about what she would be leaving, the independence she had built, the systems she had made, the specific life she had built for herself in the Thornfeld Records office over 6 years. He answered every question honestly, including the ones where the answer was "I don't know yet, but I will find out," because "I don't know yet, but I will find out" was an honest answer and a better one than a confident answer that was incomplete. She listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Last night," she said. "The packed dinner. The end of it." She paused. "Someone came to the table and said something to you. The whole quality of your presence changed." "What happened?" He was still. He had been at the packed dinner. A low-ranked wolf, a young man who had apparently had several drinks and developed some opinions about the Alpha King's visits, had said something. Not threatening, but specific in its hostility. About the nature of his interest in an Omega wolf. About whether the Alpha King of the Velther Reach was in the habit of collecting inconvenient wolves. He had addressed the young man. Quietly. With the kind of quiet that left no uncertainty about what it meant. The young man had not said anything else. He had thought, because he was thorough, and because he had been watching for it, that no one else had registered the exchange. Lireth had not been at the dinner. "How do you know about that?" he said. "3 people who were at the dinner came through the east corridor this morning," she said. The way they walked past this office, the specific quality of awareness, like they were trying to see through the door, told me they were thinking about something that involved me. She paused. "And the way you sat down today was different from the other mornings. Careful, like you were placing something down gently." He looked at her. "Someone said something at the dinner," he confirmed. "About my interest in you. It was not. It was hostile in a specific way. Because I'm Omega," she said. "Yes. And because I'm blind." "Yes." She absorbed this. "What did you do?" she asked. "I addressed it," he said. "Addressed." "Directly," he said, and without ambiguity. A pause. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I'm choosing to." She paused. "People don't often do that. On my behalf. Not in that way." She turned her face at the listening angle. "You said you're not managing anything. That you're being honest." "Yes." "Then I want to be honest too," she said. "What I feel, the bond and also what's around it and underneath it, is the most real thing I've felt since I was 7 years old and someone carried me out of a burning house." She breathed. "I don't say that to pressure you or to make it larger than you can hold. I say it because you said you weren't going to manage it, and I'm not going to either." He was quiet. "Lireth," he said. "Yes." "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want to be honest that it's a large thing." "Ask it." "I want to bring you to the Velther Reach," he said. "Not immediately. Not on a timeline that doesn't serve you. But as the first step toward," he paused, "toward building something that is fully real. That is not visits on packed business and records office mornings and letters that are more than they present themselves as." He paused again. "I want to give you the time you need in the Reach to understand whether it can hold what you've built here. To understand whether I can hold it." He looked at her face. "And if the answer is yes, if it's genuinely yes, you're yes, not obligated or managed, I want to formally recognize the bond." The records office was very quiet. She pressed her hands flat on the desk. "2 months," she said. "What?" "Give me 2 months," she said. "To transition the records system so that it runs without me. To say goodbye properly to the people here who have been real to me. To handle the things that need handling when you are choosing to leave a life you built." She paused. "And then I'll come." He breathed. 2 months, he agreed. "And you come back in 2 months," she said. "Not in 3 weeks. In 2 months. Let me have the 2 months to do what needs doing." "Yes," he said. She nodded. He stood to leave. "Dauren." He turned. "What you said," she said, "about whether you can hold what I've built." A pause. "You already held me once. When I was 7. When you had nothing to gain and everything to risk." She turned her face at the listening angle, and this time it was his voice she was waiting for, not the room. "I think you know how to hold things." He stood in the doorway of the records office. "I'll see you in 2 months," he said. "I'll be here," she said. "Though I suppose that's about to stop being true." Something moved through his expression that she couldn't see. But she heard it in the pause before he left. She heard everything. The 2 months did what 2 months did when they were genuine rather than performed. She organized the transfer of the records system. Her 6 years of filing logic and tactile organization system, documented with the thoroughness of someone who understood that the work mattered beyond her own involvement in it. She trained her replacement. She said goodbye to Gora. No. To Isara. No. To the people in the Thornfeld pack who had been real to her. She packed what needed packing and left what was better left. She wrote to her parents. They were alive, living in the rebuilt Vane Pack territory, and she called rather than wrote because calling was better, and she told them what was happening, and her mother cried, and her father was quiet for a long time, and then said, "The voice you always talked about. When you were small. The boy who carried you out." "Yes," she said. "He found you," her father said. "We found each other," she said. Her father was quiet for another moment. "Good," he said. "That's good." She arrived at the Velther Reach on a Tuesday in March. He met her at the border himself. Not with formal protocol, with the 2 security members who had accompanied the visits, and himself, and a vehicle that was his rather than pack official. She heard the vehicle before it stopped, heard the door, heard his footsteps, still that specific quality of displaced space, that particular weight, crossing to where she stood. "You came," he said. "I said I would," she said. "I know." A pause. "I'm glad." She held her cane and her bag and stood in the March air of the Velther Reach, and she heard. In the specific way she heard everything. The territory around her. The particular quality of this forest, these birds, this air. The compound in the distance. The weight of a place that was going to become familiar. "Tell me what it looks like," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Not surprised. She had the sense of him recalibrating to the request, which she appreciated more than she could easily say. And then he began to describe it. Not in the overcompensatory way of people who felt they were giving her something. In the way of someone who was actually looking at the place he had been in for 10 years and allowing himself to see it as if for the first time, because she was asking and she would hear whether he was really looking. He described it fully. The trees, their height, their winter bareness giving way to the first evidence of spring. The sky color, which was the specific blue-gray that suggested the weather would change by evening. The compound buildings, stone and timber, solid and practical without being cold. The way the light came through the trees at this angle. She listened. When he finished, she said, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For actually looking," she said. He was quiet. Then he offered his arm. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, just extended it. The way you extended something to someone whose hands would be useful for something else. She took it. They walked into the Velther Reach together. The formal mate bond recognition came in June, 3 months after she arrived. Not because it had taken 3 months for either of them to be certain. They had both been certain, in their different ways, before she had arrived. But because she had made him promise that she would have time to build something in the Reach that was hers before the formal recognition made her position politically significant, and he had kept the promise, and in 3 months she had built something that surprised even herself. The Velther Reach's administrative archive was, by the assessment of everyone who interacted with it, a functional disaster. Not through malice. Through the natural entropy of a system that had grown without design over 20 years. The records were there. They were just not findable in any reasonable time frame. She fixed it, not alone. She worked with the archive team, 2 of whom had the specific gift of taking direction and executing it with precision, and over 3 months she designed and implemented a system that worked for everyone, sighted and not, wolf and human, old knowledge and new. It was, Dauren told her on the morning she declared it complete, the best thing that had happened to the administrative function of the Reach in a decade. "It's a filing system," she said. "Don't minimize it," he said. She considered this. "It's a very good filing system," she amended. He looked at her. The look she had not seen but had learned to feel, from the quality of his stillness and the specific change in his voice when his face was doing it. "Yes," he said, "it is." The recognition ceremony was in the main hall of the Velther compound. Not 500 wolves. The Velther Reach's inner circle, the senior pack members, the people who would need to understand and support what was being formalized. The elder, a woman named Corvell who was 80 years old and had conducted more of these ceremonies than she could count, placed the cord and said the words. Dauren spoke his portion. Lireth spoke hers. And in the silence at the end of the formal words, when the room was holding the weight of what had just been made real, Lireth said one sentence that was not part of the ceremony. "I've been waiting 19 years to say thank you properly," she said, "to the person who carried me out." The room was quiet. Doran's hand, holding the cord, holding hers, tightened. "You already thanked me," he said. "I thanked the 14-year-old, she said. "I'm thanking the man now." He was quiet for a moment. The elder looked at the cord and at the room with the expression of someone who had been conducting ceremonies for many years and had never heard this one. "You're welcome," he said, and his voice had changed completely. It was simply his. Without the Alpha's register or the Sovereign's composure or any of the management he had developed over 20 years. Just his voice, saying the true thing, in front of everyone. The Velther Reach adjusted to her the way that real things adjusted to real additions. Not without friction, but genuinely. She was not the Alpha King's managed problem. She was the person who had fixed the archive and who could tell you exactly what was wrong with a diplomatic correspondence by listening to it read aloud once, and who, at the formal pact assembly 3 months into her formal position, sat at the council table and said 3 sentences that cut through 2 hours of circular argument and produced the resolution everyone had been looking for. There were people who had to recalibrate their understanding of what an Omega mate to an Alpha King looked like. They recalibrated. She was patient with the process in the way she was patient with most things, not because she expected it or excused it, but because she had a longer view of how people changed and what it required, and she was willing to give the process the time it needed. Dauren was not always patient with it on her behalf. She had told him, once, when he came back from a meeting where someone had said something they should not have said, visibly managing the residue of it. "I have been managing people's uncertainty about me since I was 7 years old. I am very good at it. You don't have to protect me from all of it." He had looked at her. "I know I don't have to," he said. "I want to." "I know," she said. "There's a difference." "Yes," he said. "There is." She held her hand out. He took it. "You can protect me from some of it," she said. "The part where I'm genuinely not equipped to deal with something, or where the intervention matters politically. Those ones, yes. And the rest. The rest I handle," she said. "Because I've been handling it longer than you've known me, and I'm better at it than you are." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "You are." She squeezed his hand. "Good," she said. "We understand each other." They did. There is something I want to say carefully about this story. Lireth Vane could not see the burning house when she was 7 years old. She couldn't see the boy who carried her out. She couldn't see the road when he laid her down, or the wolves coming from the settlement, or the face of anyone who helped her in the weeks after. She could not see any of the things that most people would use to understand what had happened to them. And yet she remembered. She remembered the voice, its register, its words, its specific quality of common chaos that was. She understood later, the 14-year-old Dauren managing a burning house the way the 33-year-old Dauren managed everything. Directly, without panic, with complete attention to the thing in front of him. She remembered the feeling of hold on. I have you. Don't let go. She remembered being held. Not seeing it. Feeling it. And when he walked into the assembly room 19 years later, she felt something old and specific arrive in her chest without knowing why. Because she had been reading the world through feeling for 19 years. Because the thing she had developed, in the absence of sight, was not a compensation for what she'd lost. It was its own complete thing. Its own way of being in the world. A way of being that turned out to be, for this specific story, the most direct path to the truth. She couldn't see him. She felt him clearly. And he, who had spent 20 years being looked at by everyone and seen by almost no one, had walked into a room and been read, completely, specifically, accurately, by the one person who wasn't looking. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe being seen has never been about looking. Maybe being seen is the feeling of complete attention from someone who has found you through means that cannot be faked. Someone who does not see the surface version, who reads the real thing, who hears the difference between performing and being. Lireth heard it, and Dauren, who had spent 20 years in the center of a room feeling alone in it, felt heard for the first time. Not because she saw him, because she listened. There is someone in your life right now who listens the way Lireth listened. Or you are that person for someone else. Pay attention to them. They are seeing you. I need just one more moment. Because you stayed through all of it. You were there for the burning house and the assembly room and the records office and 2 months and a June ceremony and the specific quiet of 2 people who found each other through everything that should have made it impossible. You felt it. I know you did. Because this story was never only about wolves or bonds or an alpha king with a reputation. It was about what it means to be carried out of the dark. What it means to not know, for 19 years, whether the person who saved you survived. What it means to recognize something in a room before you understand what you're recognizing. And what it means, finally, to say thank you, properly, fully, in front of everyone, to the person who has been answering for it their whole life without knowing whether the answer was received. It was received. It always was. If this story gave you something today, if any part of it landed somewhere real, then I am asking you right now, with everything I have, to hit that subscribe button. This channel exists for exactly this. For the stories that take you somewhere true. For the hour that rearranges something in you. For the reminder that the most extraordinary things in the world happen quietly, in records offices and evening gardens and along forest borders in March. Subscribe. Turn on the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being seen is not the same as being looked at. And drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because you showed up today, you stayed. You were here for every word. And in this channel, in these stories, that means something. Same time next week. Don't miss it.